As millions of electric cars hit the road, battery factories spring up at an unprecedented pace, and governments spend billions of dollars on charging networks. Honda is quietly moving in a completely different direction, one that even China or Elon Musk may not have considered. The Japanese automaker is developing a new type of powertrain that could transform the automotive market. While many other companies are focusing entirely on electric vehicles, Honda is choosing its own path and creating a technology that could change the game. Honda executives even believe this is a major breakthrough that could have a powerful impact on the electric vehicle industry. What would happen if Honda created a vehicle that did not need gasoline, did not have to be plugged in, and could still outperform an electric car? It sounds hard to believe, right? But this could become a major turning point for the future of the automotive industry. Before we get into the details, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the latest developments in technology. Now, before we explore Honda's new technology, let us go back in time and learn about the man who founded the company, Soichiro Honda. He was not the kind of businessman who only appeared in expensive suits or sat behind a massive desk. Soichiro was a true inventor, usually covered in grease and spending most of his time taking machines apart, putting them back together, and studying how they worked. Honda and its habit of refusing to follow the crowd. Soichiro Honda grew up surrounded by the sounds of machinery and the smell of oil and grease. He was far more fascinated by the way machines moved than by theories that seemed disconnected from real life. After the war, when Japan was struggling with severe shortages of transportation and fuel, Honda's first solution was not some glamorous machine. It was a small engine mounted on a bicycle, helping ordinary people get around more easily during a very difficult time. That simple beginning shaped a philosophy that would guide Honda for decades. Engineering only has real value when it solves real problems for real people. Honda's rise was never a straight line. Wartime hardship, material shortages, and the process of rebuilding forced the company to learn how to simplify, save resources, and experiment constantly. When Honda entered the automotive industry, it did not have the scale or experience of established manufacturers. What it did have was the ability to look at regulations and technical limitations from a completely different angle. The company's CVCC technology in the 1970s is a perfect example. At a time when many automakers believed they had to depend on complicated exhaust treatment systems, Honda found a way to improve the combustion process itself so its engines could meet stricter emissions standards. Later, VTEC allowed smaller engines to operate efficiently and smoothly at lower revolutions while still producing strong power when needed. When hybrid vehicles were still seen as strange and impractical, Honda was also one of the first companies to bring the technology to market. So when the automotive industry began treating internal combustion engines as outdated technology and batteries as the center of the future, Honda did not simply join the race to develop electric vehicles. It also asked an uncomfortable question: are batteries really the best solution for every vehicle, every journey, and every part of the world? That question opened the door for hydrogen to return. Why did electric vehicles become the mainstream choice? Before looking at the limitations of electric vehicles, we need to understand why the technology has grown so quickly. Electric vehicles directly solve one of the most obvious problems associated with traditional cars: tailpipe emissions. Electric motors do not burn gasoline or diesel while the vehicle is moving, so they do not release exhaust gases directly behind the car. In crowded cities, that benefit can make a real difference to local air quality. Electric motors also produce torque almost instantly, allowing vehicles to accelerate quickly and smoothly. Because electric drivetrains have fewer moving parts, they may also require less maintenance in certain areas than internal combustion powertrains. Governments around the world have promoted electric vehicles through tax incentives, emissions regulations, and carbon reduction targets. Tesla proved that electric cars did not have to be slow, unattractive, or limited to a tiny group of buyers. Traditional automakers and new manufacturers soon joined the market. Battery energy density improved, driving range increased, battery management software became more advanced, and charging networks gradually expanded. For people with private parking, the ability to plug in overnight at home is a major advantage. They do not have to visit a gas station every week. They can simply plug the car in when they get home and begin the next day with more energy in the battery. But the success of electric vehicles has not eliminated every problem. Fast charging still takes considerably longer than filling a gasoline tank, especially when charging stations are crowded. Chargers do not deliver the advertised power, or the battery reduces its charging speed to protect its long-term health. Long-distance drivers may still worry about range, particularly in cold weather, while carrying heavy loads, or when traveling at high speeds. Large battery packs increase vehicle weight and remain one of the most expensive components in an electric car. Mining, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and other minerals also raises questions about environmental damage, working conditions, supply chains, and dependence on a limited number of production regions. Battery recycling is improving, but collecting, dismantling, and recovering materials on a massive scale will still require years of investment. Electrical grids may also need major upgrades if a rapidly growing number of vehicles begin charging at the same time, especially in areas where the grid is already under heavy pressure. For people living in apartments, rental homes, or places without permanent parking, the advantage of home charging almost disappears. Those drivers must depend on public charging stations, and the experience can be very different from the convenience often shown in advertisements. These limitations become even more serious for trucks, buses, and long-distance commercial vehicles. To achieve greater range, these vehicles need heavier battery packs that take up more space and require significant charging time. However, none of this proves that electric vehicles have failed. Batteries remain highly energy efficient and are well suited to many applications, especially personal vehicles used for daily transportation. A more reasonable conclusion is that a single technology may not be ideal for every situation. That is the gap hydrogen is trying to fill. How does hydrogen actually power a vehicle? The term hydrogen vehicle can easily create the wrong impression. A fuel cell vehicle does not run on water, and it does not burn hydrogen in the same way a gasoline engine burns fuel. At its core, it is still an electric vehicle because the wheels are driven by an electric motor. The main difference is where the electricity comes from and how the energy is stored. In a battery electric vehicle, electricity is supplied from an external source and stored in a large battery pack. That battery powers the motor until its energy is depleted and it must be charged again. In a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, hydrogen is stored in high-pressure tanks. When the vehicle is operating, hydrogen enters the fuel cell stack while oxygen is taken from the surrounding air. An electrochemical reaction between the two creates electricity, which is sent to the electric motor and a smaller battery that helps balance power demand. The main byproduct released from the vehicle is water. This process is different from a hydrogen internal combustion engine, where hydrogen is burned inside cylinders to produce power. These systems may all use electricity or hydrogen, but their operating principles and efficiency levels are not the same. If hydrogen is produced using renewable electricity through water electrolysis, total emissions throughout the supply chain can be reduced significantly. This type of fuel is often called green hydrogen. However, much of the world's hydrogen can also be produced from fossil fuels, and that process still generates greenhouse gases, unless appropriate control systems are used. Once hydrogen has been produced, it must also be compressed, stored, transported, and then passed through a fuel cell to turn it back into electricity. Every one of those steps consumes energy. That means hydrogen cannot be described as completely clean simply because the vehicle releases water, and it cannot automatically be considered more efficient than sending electricity directly into a battery. This trade-off is extremely important. Hydrogen offers advantages in refueling speed and in applications where vehicles must operate almost continuously. But those advantages come with a more complicated supply chain. Electric vehicles may take longer to charge, but electricity follows a much shorter path from the grid to the battery. The real question is not whether hydrogen works. It does. The question is whether the entire system of producing, distributing, and using hydrogen can become clean enough, affordable enough, and convenient enough to compete in everyday life. That is where the story of the Honda Clarity becomes important. Honda Clarity Fuel Cell, a good car trapped inside an ecosystem that did not exist. Honda had been developing fuel cell technology long before most buyers understood what it was. The Clarity Fuel Cell was an attempt to take years of research out of the laboratory and place it inside a vehicle that families could use in everyday life. When it was introduced at the Tokyo Motor Show and later became available as a commercial vehicle in 2016, the Clarity was not simply designed to prove that a chemical reaction could work. Honda wanted to show that a hydrogen vehicle could be quiet, spacious, comfortable, and almost as easy to use as a normal sedan. The fuel cell stack was made smaller so it could be positioned more efficiently, allowing the passenger compartment to accommodate 5 people. Wave flow technology helped support the operation of the system, while the electric motor delivered smooth and quiet acceleration. According to the information provided in the source, the Clarity could travel approximately 360 miles after one refueling, with an efficiency rating equivalent to nearly 88 miles per gallon. At the time, that range was competitive with many electric vehicles. Refueling with hydrogen was also considerably faster than charging a large battery pack, while the main substance released by the vehicle was water vapor. The real problem was outside the car. Hydrogen stations were extremely rare and concentrated in a limited number of areas, such as California and a few cities in Japan. Buyers had to consider more than just driving range. They also had to determine whether a working hydrogen station existed along their route. A car that could travel 360 miles still became inconvenient if there was nowhere to refuel at the end of that journey. Hydrogen prices, operating costs, and limited fuel distribution continued to shrink the number of potential buyers. Meanwhile, electric vehicles benefited from a much stronger cycle of growth. The more electric vehicles were sold, the more reasons companies had to build charging stations. The more charging stations appeared, the more confident consumers became about buying electric cars. Incentives, marketing campaigns, and participation from many different brands also made electric vehicles easier to understand. Buyers already knew what electricity was, knew where electrical outlets were located, and could imagine charging at home. Hydrogen required them to learn an entirely new system involving high-pressure tanks and specialized refueling stations. For many people, unfamiliar technology is automatically associated with risk. By 2021, Honda had ended production of the Clarity, including the fuel cell, fully electric, and plug-in hybrid versions. Commercially, it was a failure, but it would be inaccurate to treat that failure as proof that fuel cell technology could not work. The Clarity operated on public roads, carried passengers, and delivered meaningful driving range. What it lacked was a large enough ecosystem to turn its technical capabilities into everyday convenience. A great smartphone is useless without a network. A great car can also fail when its fuel is almost impossible to find. Why did Honda choose the CR-V for its return to hydrogen? The CR-V does not need to be introduced from the beginning. It is a familiar family sport utility vehicle known for being practical, easy to use, and suitable for a wide variety of needs. Placing hydrogen technology inside a product like the CR-V helps Honda remove one layer of unfamiliarity. Buyers still see a type of vehicle they already understand: a higher seating position, a passenger compartment designed for families, and flexible interior space. The biggest difference is hidden beneath the body rather than changing how the driver interacts with the vehicle. This return to hydrogen also involves General Motors. Honda brings experience in vehicle engineering, electric motors, control systems, and decades of fuel cell research. General Motors contributes expertise in electrification, system development, and manufacturing. The goal of the partnership is not to make some exaggerated claim that hydrogen will replace every electric vehicle. The more realistic objective is to reduce the size and cost of the new fuel cell generation while increasing durability, giving the technology a better chance of moving closer to commercial use. Sharing research also prevents both companies from having to carry the entire cost of developing a technology that has not yet achieved large-scale adoption. This is especially important with hydrogen because the challenges extend far beyond the vehicle itself. A company may build a better fuel cell system, but it cannot build an entire hydrogen production and distribution network across every market on its own. Cooperation is therefore a way to reduce risk and create a foundation for more applications, ranging from personal vehicles to commercial transportation and stationary power systems. At the rear of the vehicle are high-pressure hydrogen tanks. Fuel flows from those tanks into the fuel cell stack, where it reacts with oxygen taken from the air to generate electricity. That electricity powers the traction motor and is also managed through a smaller energy storage system to handle acceleration and recover energy while the vehicle is slowing down. The driver does not feel the complex chain of chemical reactions. They press the accelerator, and the vehicle moves using an electric motor with smooth, quiet, and uninterrupted power delivery. The easiest advantage to understand is the refueling time, which is reported in the source as approximately 3 to 5 minutes. On a long journey, the difference between a few minutes and a much longer charging stop can have a noticeable impact on the schedule. A family traveling with young children or elderly passengers could stop, refuel, and continue the journey without having to think too much about charging speed. For people operating vehicles continuously, every minute spent stopped can also affect productivity. The hydrogen CR-V has also been described as having the ability to supply electricity to external equipment. During a power outage, the vehicle could potentially support lights, communications equipment, or certain essential devices, depending on the configuration and limitations of the system. The feature could also be useful while camping or at a temporary work site. However, it should be viewed as a support feature and a backup source of electricity, not as a promise that the vehicle could completely replace a home's electrical system under every possible condition. Imagine placing the vehicle in several hypothetical situations. A family that frequently travels between two cities with hydrogen stations at both ends might appreciate the short refueling time. Someone living in an apartment without the ability to install a private charger might find stopping at a hydrogen station easier than depending on public electric charging. A region with a weak electrical grid but a centralized hydrogen production and distribution center could test a different model from areas that would need to upgrade thousands of charging points. On the other hand, if the nearest hydrogen station is hundreds of kilometers away, almost every advantage of the vehicle becomes meaningless. Hydrogen CR-V versus electric vehicles. The advantages change depending on where they are used. When it comes to restoring energy, hydrogen clearly wins at the station. 3 to 5 minutes is close to the experience of filling a gasoline tank, while electric vehicles require more time depending on battery capacity, battery condition, temperature, and charger power. However, electric vehicles have one advantage hydrogen cannot copy. They can charge while they are already parked. When someone has a home charger, they can plug the vehicle in overnight and may not need to visit a charging station during most of the week. In that situation, a long charging time does not necessarily mean the driver is waiting. A hydrogen vehicle cannot refuel itself inside a garage. It will always depend on a specialized station. In terms of driving range, hydrogen systems offer attractive potential for long-distance travel because hydrogen contains a large amount of energy relative to its weight and can be refueled quickly. The Clarity was rated at approximately 360 miles, while the source describes the CR-V as targeting a range that could compete with many electric vehicles. However, electric vehicles are also traveling farther than ever before. A number on paper does not tell the entire story. Drivers need to know where stations are located, whether those stations operate reliably, and whether the route allows for a detour. An electric vehicle with a shorter range, but dozens of charging locations along the road may be more practical than a long-range hydrogen vehicle with only one available station. Infrastructure is where electric vehicles currently hold a significant lead. Electricity already exists in homes, businesses, and most populated areas, even though fast charging stations still require major investment. Hydrogen must be produced, compressed, or processed into a suitable form, transported, stored safely, and distributed through specialized equipment. Building a hydrogen station is expensive, while the initial number of hydrogen vehicles remains very small. This is why hydrogen may be better suited to fleets operating on fixed routes. Buses, taxis, trucks, and logistics vehicles can return to a central refueling point, reducing the need to build stations everywhere from the beginning. In terms of energy efficiency, battery electric vehicles usually have the advantage because electricity is sent directly into the battery and then to the motor. With hydrogen, electricity may first be used to produce the hydrogen, after which the fuel must be compressed, transported, and finally converted back into electricity inside the vehicle. Energy is lost during every conversion. Fast refueling does not automatically mean greater efficiency across the entire supply chain. This is one of the strongest arguments against using hydrogen on a massive scale for personal vehicles, especially in places where renewable electricity can be delivered directly to the grid and battery packs. The resource comparison is also not as simple as saying batteries are dirty and hydrogen is clean. Electric vehicles require significant quantities of minerals for their large battery packs. Mining and processing those materials has environmental consequences, although battery technology, recycling systems, and material chemistry continue to change. Fuel cell vehicles may use smaller batteries, but they still require materials for their storage tanks, motors, buffer batteries, and fuel cell stacks. Hydrogen infrastructure itself also requires steel, energy, and specialized equipment. A fair comparison is only possible when the entire life cycle is considered, from raw materials and manufacturing to operation and recycling. Cost currently favors electric vehicles because they are produced at a much larger scale and buyers have far more options. Hydrogen vehicles remain expensive. The fuel is not always affordable, and the cost of building refueling stations is difficult to spread across a very small number of vehicles. A hydrogen CR-V only delivers its advantages when drivers have stable access to reasonably priced fuel. If they must travel a long distance to find a station, or worry that the station might be out of service, the convenience of a 3-minute refueling stop becomes an impressive number with very little practical value. What is Honda really betting on? The vehicle itself may work well, but the hydrogen market remains trapped in a cycle. Companies do not want to build stations when there are too few vehicles because revenue cannot cover the cost. Consumers do not want to buy the vehicles when there are too few stations. Fuel prices cannot fall when production remains low, but production cannot grow when demand has not yet developed. This is the classic chicken and egg problem that prevented the Clarity from succeeding. Storing hydrogen at high pressure requires specialized tanks, inspection procedures, and equipment. Transporting hydrogen is also more complicated than sending electricity through power lines. When hydrogen is produced using fossil fuels, its climate benefits are reduced. When green hydrogen is produced using renewable electricity, the amount of electricity required and the cost of production become major concerns. The success of the CR-V therefore cannot be determined only by fuel cell durability or passenger comfort. It depends on hydrogen production facilities, transport vehicles, refueling stations, government policy, and a large enough number of customers. A more realistic opportunity may appear first in buses, long-distance trucks, taxis, seaports, logistics centers, and commercial fleets. These vehicles often operate for many hours, return to fixed locations, and cannot remain parked for long charging sessions. A centralized station could serve dozens or even hundreds of vehicles, according to a clear schedule. If infrastructure begins forming around transportation corridors in California, Japan, Germany, China, or other regions with supportive policies, personal vehicles may eventually benefit from a network originally built for businesses. But that is a possible path of development, not proof that the hydrogen network has already been completed. Honda may not need hydrogen to replace every electric vehicle. A more reasonable strategy is to maintain several technologies at the same time. Battery electric vehicles are well suited to cities and drivers who can charge at home. Hybrids can reduce fuel use during the transition period. Fuel cells may serve vehicles that need fast refueling, long range, or nearly continuous operation. Biofuels, synthetic fuels, and hydrogen internal combustion engines could be researched for specialized applications, while fuel cell systems could also provide backup electricity or power commercial vehicles. This approach fits Honda's long-standing tradition of refusing to lock the future into a single answer before understanding the actual conditions in which the technology will be used. Honda continues to promote electrification and carbon neutrality, so the hydrogen CR-V is not a declaration of war against electric vehicles. It is more like a form of technological insurance. If batteries continue becoming cheaper, charging becomes faster, and infrastructure expands widely, electric vehicles may dominate the personal transportation market. If certain sectors still require refueling within a few minutes, hydrogen may preserve a role of its own. Honda only needs this technology to create value in the right segments. It does not need hydrogen to win every battle. Can hydrogen replace electric vehicles? The first possibility is that electric vehicles continue expanding rapidly throughout the personal vehicle market. Battery prices fall, driving range increases, recycling improves, and charging stations become widely available. In that situation, the advantage of home charging combined with high energy efficiency could leave hydrogen as a small option in only a few markets. The second possibility is that hydrogen develops primarily in commercial transportation. Trucks, buses, and fleets operating continuously could create enough demand to support centralized refueling stations. Infrastructure along fixed transportation routes could gradually expand, and personal vehicles, such as the CR-V, might eventually use a network originally built for businesses. The third possibility, and perhaps the most realistic one, is that several solutions continue to exist together. Electric vehicles will not disappear. Internal combustion engines will gradually decline. Hybrids will continue serving the transition period, and hydrogen will occupy certain segments depending on geography, energy sources, and operational requirements. A city with a strong electrical grid may prioritize charging. A logistics center with centralized hydrogen production may choose fuel cells. There is no single formula that works everywhere. In the end, the hydrogen CR-V is not proof that the electric vehicle era is about to end. It is a reminder that the energy transition is more complicated than a battle between gasoline and batteries. Hydrogen offers advantages in refueling time, driving range, and high-intensity vehicle operation, but its greatest weaknesses remain limited: refueling stations, high costs, and the availability of clean fuel. Electric vehicles offer strong efficiency, wider infrastructure, and home charging, but they still face challenges involving battery weight, energy replenishment time, and certain specialized transportation requirements. Honda has proven that fuel cell technology can operate on public roads. What it has not been able to prove on its own is whether the entire hydrogen ecosystem can grow quickly enough for ordinary drivers to trust it. The success of the CR-V will therefore not be measured only by sales numbers or technical specifications. It will be measured by whether hydrogen is available in the right place, at the right time, and at a price people can accept. If hydrogen stations became as common as gas stations and fuel prices fell to an affordable level, would you choose a hydrogen CR-V that could be refueled in just a few minutes? Or would you still trust an electric vehicle that could be charged at home? Share your choice, like the video, and subscribe to the channel to follow the next major developments in the automotive industry.